You're welcome to this discussion, community discussion today. This is David Amakobe, Dr. David Amakobe for W500G. Today we are going to have a discussion on why we should be vaccinated or we should not be vaccinated for COVID-19. We are particularly concentrating on Africans or the Black people because we have noticed that research from Kaiser says that fewer Black people are willing to get vaccinated than the majority of Americans. And also looking across the pond to Africa, Africans have a hesitancy towards the vaccination. And looking at the morbidity and mortality weekly report from CDC, it shows that Africans have a higher case fatality rate than the other people. So I would like to ask these gentlemen, Dr. Kebeso and Mr. Morgan Ikonne, to explain to me why I should be vaccinated when there is no trust with the people who make the vaccine, with the people who regulate the vaccination, and the people who provide it. So, Dr. Kebeso, I'll give you, you make an introduction of yourself a little bit and go to Ikonne, and then we go ahead with it.
Now, thank you so much for giving me an opportunity to be participating in this forum. And I would want to give a disclaimer that whatever I may share here today, I do not represent any company, whether that company that I work for. So I'm just stating my views as I see it, and so that I'm trying to remove myself from what we call intellectual property issues that may arise if I stated things representing my company. So I will represent myself in this discussion. And first, I am an epidemiologist, and I work for Pfizer Pharmaceutical Company. I am a clinical operations lead in the company, and right now I am working with the COVID vaccines. And so I am in the pot. When I speak is things we've seen, things we've heard, things we have had data to present on. So I will only speak on the numbers from the way I see them, not the way so please do not use this against the company I work for or anyone else. But I would want to stay on much on what I've seen and what I can do to help our populations out there so that we may be able to understand the times and help one another, because it's important for us to be able to survive this pandemic so that our families, our children, our wives, our husbands would be there to see us and enjoy us. So please, this is for our own good and our own use. So if I may start, we do have right now 2 vaccines which have been, which have shown a great efficacy, as in above 90%. Now, a very good vaccine, normally, if we have an efficacy or it is effective at 80%, we are good to go. Because normally, if you are able to immunize people up to 80% of the population, then we are able to acquire the item we call herd immunity. And herd immunity means that a herd coming from the herd of cattle, the majority of the people have been vaccinated, and therefore, what it means, the chance or the risk of contaminating the virus is lowered, because many people cannot transmit the virus or cannot get it to pass it to the other. So if we have about 20% not being vaccinated, the chances for them to find a person who has the virus to give it to them is lowered. And that is where we say when we have about 80% of the population immunized, we are able to curb that disease and control it to a greater advantage. Now, herd immunity can occur by allowing populations to have the infection and then they develop immunity. Now, the underside of that is that some people who will not be able to survive the disease or the virus will die, right? And so it's what Dr. Atlas from wherever he comes from, he was claiming he comes from Stanford. And of course, you know, Stanford disavowed him. This gentleman who was working for the task force for COVID with Trump, he was actually peddling this other side that, hey, let's all just go out there, get COVID, and those who will die, they will die. Those who will survive, we will end up developing the herd immunity. So as you can see, it is not ethical because there are those vulnerable populations which will be swept by the virus. And we have to be, who wants our father or our grandmother to die just because we want to develop the herd immunity? So ethically, it's not a good thing to just allow people to get exposed to the virus. Those who will die, die off. Those who will survive, we end up having the herd immunity. So,
okay, good. Well, let's just look for a minute. I bring in Mr. Morgan. Morgan, what's your view on this particular one? Because Dr. Terry says, okay, we have to go towards herd immunity. That means we have to have at least 80% of people either recovering from the virus or being vaccinated. But the vaccination way is the best way to go because we will protect the vulnerable, the ones who would die. The point is, the population we're talking about, Kaiser says, the study from Undefeated and Kaiser says 17% of Black people say definitely they'll get the vaccine if it's been approved by scientists, but 27% say they will definitely not get it, okay? And 20% say maybe they will get it. The point is, looking at it from your point of view from the population, what do you think about that, those numbers? How do we get to make sure that 80% of Africans, African diaspora, and Black people get vaccinated?
Oh, thank you, Dr. Amakobe, and it's a pleasure being here today with this wonderful panel. As Doc was elucidating, and as your question seems to suggest, I think we need to understand the historical antecedent of the challenge of the Black man when it comes to vaccination. Also, how the religious undertone of their belief system impacts on their believability and trust for vaccines, coupled with the politicization of this current vaccine that is hopefully going to come true for coronavirus. These three major elements constitute quite a hindrance within the Black community. Therefore, the percentage that you've just mentioned, 17% being willing, 27 saying no, 20 saying maybe, these are more so reflective of the fact that there is a deep distrust within the Black community when it comes to this vaccination issue, especially the way it has been peddled and the history they have had with it. But the challenge with it is that data has proven that the Black community are more vulnerable to this infection. And statistically, for the African immigrants, majority of us work in the healthcare industry, and supposedly CDC advisory board is suggestive that we should be, those in the healthcare should be forced to receive it. So for me, it is a challenging thing. Therefore, I think that much of effective information needs to be disseminated. Much of community engagement needs to be part of this process. For me, it shouldn't just be FDA approving the vaccine, but ensuring that people are comfortable enough to take it, especially the Black folks, who are more susceptible to this virus than their white counterpart.
But I'll come to you, Dr. Ari, and I'm looking at the Kaiser research. It says 35% of Black people do not have trust in both the regulators and the companies that are researching on this vaccine. How do we build that trust? Dr. Ari? Oh, you are on mute.
Sorry, I'm speaking to a muted microphone.
Yes.
Now, just to follow up on what my brother said, and then your question. Now, when you have a background where Black people already distrust government, because government before has done atrocities to the Black population. Now, we could cite a study at Tuskegee in Alabama, where government was actually using African population as guinea pigs. Yeah. So when they discovered that, they'll always look at, hey, these people want to use us as guinea pigs. So that's number one, where distrust is both historical and political. All along, the government has not been on the front line to champion the rights of the Black people. So as Black people turn around the corner, they'll always see these people have a sinister motive in trying to cause harm on us instead of doing good. So both are political and historical factors. They have an effect on how we conduct studies here in the United States, and how we have an uptake of new medications, not only just vaccines, but all other medicines around in the spectrum. So African Americans have always shied off from participating in clinical trials based on that historical factors and political factors. And then we come along and say we add religion. Now, religion, the African American, or the most Africans, we are highly religious. Now, there are other factors where if you mention like the vaccines which Moderna and Pfizer have put through, and that is Pfizer working together with BioNTech of Germany, these vaccines are coming from a recombinant DNA technology. Now, when you start telling people of religion, and especially, we fear that, hey, you cannot inject someone else's DNA into me, I'm going to be like that person. I'm going to be like the white people who are irresponsible, or things like that. So I don't know where that DNA is coming from. Already you have added another, layer of mistrust into the system. Now, let's then go ahead. How do we tell our populations to be able to see that not only just the vaccines we are talking about, but all other clinical trials in general are now safe and good for everybody? Number one, if I were to speak with my people, which I think I'm doing right now, I would tell them government has changed from where it was before in terms of clinical research. Now, we must incorporate all subsections or sections of the populations in order for the trial to be approved. Now, let's say we have 12% of African Americans in the United States, and we have 6% of Asians. So when we are doing recruitment for trials, we must ensure that the population has 12% African American, 65% of Caucasian, 6% of Asian, 3% of Pacific Islanders, so that it is proportionately similar to the general population. So FDA would not approve any trial that is put across which has only one subset of the population. And that is why there was a delay in, let's say, the vaccine that we were working on, it would have come out pretty fast. But because we had issues of enrollment of the Black population, it delayed a little bit. Let's say if we were to go with speed or as the uptake of the white or Caucasian population was, by around July, we should have had the results come out. But because we had that delayed uptake of the African population, we were not able to reach that threshold in time. But as of now, we have companies have applied. I want to be very careful not to speak for the organization. These companies which have come out to say, let's say Pfizer and Moderna, they have applied for approval by FDA. Now, FDA, what they are looking at before they do the approval, of course, you know, one of the, I'm glad that the UK has gone ahead to approve one of these vaccines to be used in the United Kingdom, and it will probably follow suit with the US because we are almost using similar, I would say, the EU modalities of approval are just similar with FDA approvals. And we all know that the International Organization for Research takes care of the three giants, the EU, Japan, and the US. So whatever those three do, or one of them does, you know that it will be almost taken by the other two counterparts. So I wouldn't be surprised to see these vaccines approved in the United States, and this is coming very quickly. But
I'll give a pushback a little bit there before you go ahead. You realize there's Japan, EU, and the US.
Yes.
There's a big hole there about the data coming from Africa or not coming from Africa. There's a problem of trust there because, first of all, they don't want to participate, and then they argue that their data was not included, so it might not be good for them. How do we break that? How do we make sure that, first of all, the argument, I do not trust you, so I will not take part in the trial, but then after you do the trial, I will not trust you because you did not you not include me in the trial?
Now, a good question. Now, number one, really, Africa did not refuse to participate in this trial. They were not given that opportunity in Africa.
Okay.
And this was the reason. Now, it's usually very tedious in terms of operations to run a trial in Africa. You know that we have bottlenecks in terms of government approval, corruption, you know, even the setting. You can realize some of these vaccines, they require high, very low temperatures for storage. Now, to create such an infrastructure, let's say in Kenya, where we have power outages, blah, 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 you know, because of that, those trials were not actually taken there. And this is the reason. We say we already have the representation of the Black African people elsewhere, where we have the operations easier, like here. You know, similarly, we do have African populations in Europe, which can be used as a subset to reflect of what is in Africa. Now, number two, this actually happened to be an ethical issue. You realize when we started on HIV trials, majority of those were pushed to Africa. And there was a problem because in Africa, people are not even the ethical issues. We are talking about informed consent. Yeah. People are not getting the information that what they are doing is actually a trial. And that led to many ethical issues coming out of Africa. And so to avoid those ethical considerations and problems, Africa as a country was not really offered, as a world, a continent was not offered that opportunity to participate in these quickly because we wanted data very quickly. So we did not have enough time to start those long operations. Now, just to give you in a nutshell, if we were to make an application to do a clinical research in Kenya using Kenya Medical Research Institute, it takes almost over a year to have everything set up until acceptance. Now, if we were to do the same for the US, when we have a molecule which we are testing, it is less than 3 weeks and we have approval. So you can see the issues. So those operational problems and difficulties led to these vaccines not being tried in Africa, but they were tried elsewhere where the African population is kind of like taken care of.
I want to agree, but I will push you and I'll push Pfizer and all the other pharmaceuticals a little more. There is a narrative that comes out of Africa saying that it's not possible, and nobody tries, because W500G is my company I run. That's the field I am in. The point is, everybody just don't want to talk about it, but I know that that time can be reduced and should be reduced, because the data that is being applied for the Black people in Europe and in the US are not basically the same as the Africans in Africa. No, unless you are taking the diaspora, which in this case you should have actually increased the percentage of diaspora so that they can actually replace them. But now it's not you, but we are putting this idea out there so that we don't have a situation such that when the vaccine comes out and is now being pushed to Africa, the anomalies arise more there, and the narrative continues that this is what they are doing. You understand? This is a chicken and egg thing, because we didn't test there. When we do mass vaccination, there will be more problems there, and then they will actually justify what they are saying.
There is an answer to that. Mm-hmm. Now, number one, remember clinical trials are done in phases.
Yes.
So the African population or people in Africa will get a chance to participate in what we call mass.
Phase 3?
Phase 4, actually.
Phase 4, okay.
Phase 3 is what we have just conducted, which needed about 35,000 people. Now, and I want to state this a little bit so that people see the clarity.
Mm-hmm.
Research does not end at the approval. The approval just says now proceed. We are at a certain degree sure that this is safe. Let's say at about 98% the degrees of confidence. However, after phase 3, we still continue with research. So the people are going to receive the vaccines from, let's say, year 1, year 2, still that is in research. We are going to collect more data and continue to follow and see, is there any of these now people having anything which we call an adverse event? Is there any serious adverse event? So that way, when we roll out the vaccine first time to Africa, we are actually proceeding straight to phase 4. The first, let's say, 10,000 people to receive that vaccine will be in trial. Okay. Now, so they are not just going to receive just the vaccine as that. We will take their data, everything, and we will follow them, look at their pharmacodynamics and everything and see. And others, they may not have to report to the clinic every day, but we will, whenever they receive the vaccine, they'll be told, if you experience anything which is abnormal and toward your normal physical functioning, please come back to the hospital. So that way they will self-report the data that we need to proceed to conclude finally that this vaccine is safe, efficacious to everybody, including later on to the children that we have not actually studied in the phase 3 that we are doing right now.
Mr. Morgan, the CDC just said yesterday, recommended that when the vaccine comes out fine in the United States, the people who will get it first are healthcare providers and people in nursing homes. The problem is, or the challenge we have here is, the majority of the healthcare providers are minorities, are Black, that group of people who say they will not get it, but because they are in that one, the employers will require them to take the vaccine. So speak about the fact that it looks like it's going to be a cohesion thing, and it is not a trust building. It's not trust building at all, because first of all, they are coming to a group which, of course, is exposed the fertility rates higher, but they don't have the trust. But now it's not like they are going to have a choice. Morgan, for you.
I think Doctor has done quite a justice in the elucidations that he has espoused concerning the processes by which this vaccine development has taken. And fundamental for me to this whole issue is not just the modalities put in place for the production of the vaccine or getting the vaccine to the place where there is a high percentage of its workability or efficaciousness. My concern is the trust element. And to your question, yes, it does appear suggestively as though this is being coerced upon the population in question, African Americans and diasporas, who, as it is right now, on every research, every data, every pooling that has been done, the percentage of those who are open to taking this vaccine from the African immigrants or African Americans are very low. So for me, I think what needs to be done, speaking my mind and my opinion on this, would be a need for greater sensitization. And when we are talking about sensitization, I think that there is a necessity to incorporate people of color to do that much more in a greater dimension. People are much more receptive, just like what we're doing now. I'm listening to Doctor. Some of the things he has said are quite resounding and reassuring to me. If somebody who does not look like him is talking to me, there is already a biasness in my mind concerning this individual. So no matter how intellectual or how consistent the information may sound, that biasness is not by any means removed. I'm listening, but I'm biased. As against when someone who looks like me, who understands the dynamics of my life, my cultural challenges, my religious challenges, my individualistic perspective and perception to issue is speaking to me. So I think that there is a necessity to build a high level of trust, utilizing experts and people who are within the African American community and the diaspora community to speak to them in a more informative and in a more educative way. Organizing symposiums and workshops as to the modalities utilized for the production of the vaccine is critical, and doing so by incorporating people of color who have been involved, possibly, having some sort of a more coordinated effort in this approach from the African American community would be a great thing to help dissipate this mistrust. Because if we don't dissipate this mistrust, we are not going to actually achieve the purpose for which the vaccine is being produced and being approved, which is to curb this pandemic. Frankly, I think that needs to take place before we can actually say, okay, you gotta take it. Because if we don't do that, now we have created another mistrust in the mind of people who are already struggling to just stop looking at the rear mirror when it comes to the matters of vaccine and the histories of it among their people.
Dr. Kebeso, you realize that you have a bigger responsibility than anybody else who works for Pfizer or in the pharmaceutical industry. It is the representation that's important. I would like to hear from you. I will trust you. I think that when you are sitting at that table, you will be thinking about yourself for your children, your brothers and sisters. So tell us, because it is the safety concerns doesn't concern me much, but lack of trust is the important thing. Speak about it, because the information you are giving under the process is good, we need to go a little further than we would have gone because the vessel, the messenger, like now, yesterday I saw in the news that the president had summoned the FDA guy to come and explain why he has not signed off. And knowing the history of the person who is talking does not give me a lot of confidence. So talk about that. You know, it's like we are shooting ourselves in the foot because we are giving the messenger, the person who is sort of forcing FDA or the scientists to approve the vaccine, is the person who we know is accelerating the execution of black convicts and pardoning white convicts. Now you tell me I take the vaccine he has forced to approve. Tell me.
Doc, scientists do not resolve political issues. Number one disclaimer. So, however, let me stay on my line, which is scientific. Now, the only problem is that science does not occur in a vacuum.
Yes.
We under political institutions. That is where we operate from. However, I want to help someone who is out there trying to understand this vaccine and see for themselves. Forget about the politics of the day. Forget about the pressure. But this is what I'll give you. People, you've heard many times it is being said that vaccines, the average amount of time of producing a vaccine which has been safe and efficacious has been about 4 to 5 years. All right? Yes. And in modern history, we have a vaccine, which happened, the measles vaccine took about 18 months. So that is the quickest vaccine that has ever come through. When we talk about the hepatitis C vaccine, all those have happened over 10 years. So when we go down and then ask ourselves a question, which I know creates a lot of pressure and mistrust, how come we are able to develop a vaccine for corona in less than 8 months? So that will cause everybody who has that information that vaccines take roughly about 4 to 5 years. How then can you convince me to take a vaccine which only took 8 months? Now, these are now the real reasons, scientific reasons. Forget about politics. Number one, the corona vaccine did not just start from nowhere. We had a baseline to operate from. So its safety and efficacy were kind of like already evaluated in the sister vaccines for MERS and SARS, which are sister viruses to the corona. They are actually coronaviruses, only that they are not 19. The other one, they are all cousins, or rather brother, sister. Number two, one should understand that those older vaccines like measles and the rest and polio, we used the live viruses to develop those vaccines. So attenuated virus, we weakened the virus to develop the vaccine. But this new technology, which is effective and quicker, actually very fast, it is called the recombinant DNA technology, where you take a human DNA and take the virus DNA, a subsection, inject to the human DNA to create a new DNA, which is human virus DNA. Now, in that new DNA that we have created, when you inject it to a person, the person will have a DNA in him, which now will tell the body cells, you know, DNA is essence is actually like a key to start a reaction. So it tells the body cells, hey, produce more of this copy, or rather we say replicate more of this DNA. We need them. So the body will go ahead and produce many other DNA, which will be having the antibodies to deal away with the coronavirus. So once one gets this new recombinant DNA vaccine, and that is actually what Moderna and Pfizer are using, you get as DNAs, and this is very minute things. So don't be worried that you are getting a cell. It's not a cell of another person. You're simply getting already a changed thing. It is the human cell actually works like just a vehicle to hold the coronavirus vaccine, rather coronavirus DNA. Once you take those, you put in the human system, then they start, we call it messenger. They send messages to the human body to reproduce. My bad. Sorry for that. Mm-hmm. They send messages to the human DNA to reproduce many of those new DNAs that are required. And once we have them in the body, they already elicit a reaction, or we call it an antibody reaction, so that whenever a virus will be coming in, it will be countered by these DNA which already you are carrying around. So this is a new technology and it works faster. But in all the cases where we have to take the virus, inject, kill it a little bit, try it on a person, those people get sick. We are like, no, we didn't kill it enough. We try to kill it again more. Oh, it died completely. There is no reaction. So we have to look for a balance. But when it comes to the recombinant DNA, there is nothing you're balancing. All you need to do, get a vehicle, create a DNA, reproduce so many of them. Now you have a new human virus DNA. Take that, put it into another person. They send messages into the DNA decoding or coding material, and they'll reproduce those many cells. So this is one part which I think we should explain to people so that they understand. Once they understand that, hey, the production of the coronavirus is not as similar as to the polio vaccine, the measles vaccine. This is
there.
Yes.
What you're saying, the production of the vaccine, the process itself changed. Yes. Technology changed.
Yes.
So the timeline that we are used to is according to an old process.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we cannot relate it to the fact that an old vaccine used to take 20 years, and why is this one now taking shorter? It is not because of politics, not because of anything, it's because technology changed. That particular information is very important for every one of us to understand, to know that you did not take a shortcut, but technology changed. It's more like computers. 20 years ago, we had bigger computers. We had to have a large computer in the office to have capacity, but now we have it in the pocket. So with that information, that's good. That should reduce the distrust a little bit, because of distrust, most of it was coming from the timing. How could they reduce, and how could they reduce? Were they taking corners? But you have said it is not the corners, it is the technology. We are not killing virus and testing to see how dead it is. We are just taking a little part of it and then putting in there. Thank you. Go ahead. That's a good thing to understand.
Thank you. And just to make it even more, just to follow on your line, when the measles vaccine was produced, which took those many years that I spoke about, that time, if you are sending a written message, it will take, from the US to Kenya, it will take about 2 months to get there.
Yeah.
But right now, if we were to send something written, how long will it take to get there?
Almost instantaneous. Right now, everybody in Kenya is reading.
Exactly.
Yeah,
so
okay.
The technology has changed. And that is why now it's faster to produce a vaccine as opposed to those older technologies which used the real live virus to produce the vaccine. Now we are using just the gene, the DNA of the virus to produce the antibodies. All right? There we go. Then the other thing I wanted to say, it is not only the scientists who can carry this message and pass it on. Community people, you, churches will come in and try to demystify these issues which are already there. That, hey, look, they are producing just something real quick, it's not safe. Now, I will speak as me. If this vaccine, I will take it. So if I can tell you that I'll take it, I know, number one, recombinant DNAs vaccines have, or rather even medications which we are using right now, recombinant DNA to produce cancer medications, they have countered those other before. So they are very safe, they are effective, and that this is the way of medicine now. In every new medications which we are coming along, we are moving on to the gene therapy. We are focused on using the DNA to make some changes within the system, and then we are able to prevent some of those issues that we may have. So if one asks me, Kebeso, if the vaccine was given today, will you take it? I will raise up my hand and say, yes, I will. Because I trust this technology, I know it, and I know it's safe. Number two, we should go ahead and tell our people that the DNA you receive is not actually Kebeso's DNA. So don't say, if I receive that DNA, I'll start behaving like Kebeso. That DNA is just specific to make the antibodies, not to make your body. It will not come in and start changing your cells. It doesn't. All it does, once you receive it, the genetical materials, they start sending signals, produce more cells like this one, which has been put in. And when they produce more of those, now you have more antibodies awaiting the virus to engulf it and destroy it, so you will not get infected. You get infected, but it does not really stay in. It gets in and it's destroyed within a moment. So we can't even test that virus, because as soon as it comes, it's already done. So similarly, as I was saying, just to make it shorter, is that we need to let the church clergy people to know this information, as to pass this information to many other people, so that they understand that really the virus, that mystery or those issues of saying this DNA is Dr. Amakobe's DNA. No, you cannot even trace it back to the original, because it's a particle, it's so minute. I mean, you can't even see DNA using a normal microscope. You have to use a microscope up to a magnification of 1 million times to be able to see a DNA. And then we are not even taking the full DNA. It's particles to make a fresh, new recombinant DNA. I think in a nutshell, that's how I'll put it. It's difficult to
No, but you are getting there. No problem. We are getting now, Mr. Ikonne. Dr. has put the responsibility of reaching the communities on churches, because most diaspora are religious. Most African Americans are religious. What part do you think churches are supposed to play in making sure that we get this message across, that the technology change, that's why the time was collapsed, is not because we were precious into doing something. It was also the fact that maybe the sample used may not include a lot of people, but it is a DNA of a person. It's not been engineered to exclude or include or harm other people.
I think that Dr. has done a magnificent job in breaking down in a very understandable manner the process by which this vaccine is coming to be. And I think the point he made as it relates to the shrinking of the timeline being that which is primarily orchestrated by new technology, not shortcuts, which has been part of the major mistrust issue out there, is critical. I think to answer your question, I will believe that, as he had stated, that there is a need, and I think this is where governmental policy makers needs to understand that for this vaccine to work, they need to intentionally do an inclusive sensitization. If, per se, the African diasporas are very religious, which we are, it will be tantamount to failure in their intent to have people vaccinated, to just keep on pushing, go take vaccine, without having to speak to community leaders who have a voice among those who they want to be vaccinated. Therefore, I think that the foremost thing right now that this administration or the incoming administration may begin to consider is how can we meaningfully engage community leaders and religious leaders, and to explain to them both in a scientific way and in a practical way how this thing works, the process is taken, so that they are able to go back and explain it to their parishioners. That's number one. Number two is when it comes to what Doc was explaining, how a minute element of the DNA is extracted and that of the virus is extracted. And the combination of the two is what is utilized for the formation of the vaccine. And when somebody receives it, the person's antibody automatically kicks in naturally. I think the explanation of the natural process that it takes for the antibodies to be developed is critical. If I understand that it is my own cells, my own body, my own gene that is producing this defense as against I'm injected somebody's S, it will help me to be open to receiving it, because it is not against nature, which is the most religious argument. The most religious argument is that vaccines are other people's antibodies, other people's cells, other people's gene that you're putting on people. But if they understood, no, that this is actually your own gene, your own cells, your own immune system producing what you need. It is like you put something that triggers me to respond and to produce what should be produced. That explanation of the natural order is critical. And when that is explained from a religious vintage, it will be more convincing and more appealing for folks to buy into it. But it cannot happen if the people who need to be explaining this are ostracized out of it. So as much as they are spending money in public awareness, they need to think about how to incorporate these community leaders and voices and have workshops and symposiums to explain these things and help them understand how they can carry the message along. Thirdly, is that the religious leaders, when they've understood this, now they can demystify. They can demystify the concept that vaccines are something that is anti their faith, because in so many religious and religion entities, it is believed that vaccine is something that is our current president, when he was running in 2016, we can recall his statements about vaccine. And that captured the mind of a lot of evangelical Christians in America. And this is a great population. So I think these things will help if the government can begin to proceed it, and if faith community leaders will stop making political decisions based on their political affiliations and start looking at science to be that which is not against the scriptures, but work cooperatively with faith and scripture. I think that will make a lot of difference.
Yeah, I think what we're saying is we have technologically, we have the product, we have a problem of uptake, and it's behavioral. It was behavioral in the beginning, wearing masks, distancing is behavioral, and uptake is behavioral. It is not, instant gratification. We're working on people, and we must have, I was listening to TV yesterday, and somebody was saying, even on the far right, who have been preaching against wearing masks, we need to get those people to be able to explain to their followers what we are explaining. We cannot say they told them not to wear masks, so we can't talk to them. Same thing here. We need to listen and understand why Africans and Black people would be hesitant to trust the vaccine, after we have understood it, we need to work with them. Like today, I'm actually coming out feeling very nice because I was having a lot of questions as to how a vaccine that used to take 5 years, everybody's been saying it's been taking 5 years, now we're taking a shot. They thought that that is a point or a badge of honor. To me, that was something to run away from until Dr. Kebeso said, no, it is the process that changed. And as soon as you tell me the process changed, the technology changed, I started listening. So I think that in the uptake process, in the uptake stage, we need to be able to explain more about the process than we assumed before. What do you think? What do you think, Kebeso? What do you think about that?
That's exactly true. You've said it. I'm just going to add a little light. Now, when we began research, actually, remember we had something we were calling convalescent antibodies. Now, that is different from the vaccine. And that is the cocktail that Trump took. The convalescent antibodies means we have you, Dr. Amakobe, you get corona, all right?
Yes.
And on that process, you recover. So you develop natural antibodies in you. Okay. Now, what we do, we take some of your blood and we do what we call high-speed separation of cells so we go in and separate the blood cells and plasma. Now, within plasma is where we have the antibodies. So basically, what we have harvested are your antibodies. We take those antibodies when Kebeso is sick of COVID, we give him the antibodies. We inject him your antibodies into my system to take care of the corona. Now, that is direct that I'm actually using your blood because I'm using your blood plasma to take care of my issue by using your antibodies. Now, that is a separate technology, which we, instead of using a vaccine, you go in, harvest antibodies, and add those antibodies into someone who is already sick of corona. But in this other one, we are targeting healthy Dr. Amakobe. He has not been sick of corona. We inject the DNA, which will have a messenger RNA, which will instruct your body to start producing antibodies, now which are your antibodies, not anybody's, to take care of corona when he comes. So that is the difference. And many people mix that convalescent antibody use with the vaccine. So once we tell people that difference, they'll be able to understand. And we have those two systems still on. Mr. Trump, if at all he was sick, took the convalescent antibodies. Now, just to answer your earlier question, you said, how would you trust Mr. Trump in harassing FDA to make this decision? Now, number one, FDA is also walking a thin line. But remember, this vaccine probably would have even been announced before election. But because for some of these problems were foreseen, and we don't want uptake to be associated with politics, we have to stay back and let politics drive and then move in the science. So he may as well scream and say, we want this to start tomorrow, but FDA has time to review the data that they have seen. They have to look at the numbers. They have to satisfy that, hey, did we actually enroll 12% of African Americans? And out of these 12% of African Americans, did we have any adverse events? If they were there, are they serious? So they have to look at the data that we give them and validate and then approve. They just don't wake up and say approved. So in as much as they can call them, and I know sometimes they may cave in, but the reality is the process is still going on as normal. And one thing which makes me even, look at it and smile, probably it would have even been approved yesterday or sometime. Look at what the EU has done or, the UK has done. based on, because they are looking at data, they also looked at the same data. It's no different data that was presented in the UK. It's the same data that was given, because the approval process, that the packet that was given to FDA is the same packet.
Yes, same packet. You know that.
Yeah. So since that approval has happened, even this should have happened. But because we don't want it to be, it's pressure from here, somehow people are taking their time before they come to that answer. And then finally, we just remember, if we target our populations back home, we just have to tell them the science and the benefit. And if you, and I know most of us probably have spouses who are working in the healthcare, or our children. Now, it's important to start with those. I know my wife initially, she was like, I will not take your vaccine. And then she works in the healthcare. She said, she works for Kaiser. And she was like, if Kaiser wants to fire me, they can fire me. I'm not going to take this vaccine. And I took time and explained to her and said, look, I asked her, what is the reason you will not take this vaccine? And she said, the thing that you produce just in 6 months. I said, oh, easy. I'll answer you. How long did it take for us to do ABCD then? And how fast are we able to do it now? This is this technology. Once we break that, barrier, people understand. And my wife, she was actually calling. I've just muted her. She agreed and said, oh, if that is the case, when is that vaccine happening? So she's ready to use it. And so if we can pass the same messages to our people, they understand, they minus the politics of the day and look at the science, they'll be able to uptake these vaccines and move on.
Thank you, guys. We have been talking. You may not believe it, but it's been an hour since we started talking. So I will give you just a few minutes to close, but I think we will be calling upon you more times to come, so that we want to make sure that we get this message across to our people, that it's a science, it's safe, and it's for the general good of everybody, that everybody who can get vaccinated, so that we can get at 80%, and we increase the percentage of Africans and African Americans who would take the vaccine, because in that way all of us will be safe. So starting with Mr. Ikonne, what is your final message to the people?
Thank you, Dr. Amakobe. This has been a very robust conversation, and Doc, I appreciate your timeless input and explanation. My final word to those who are listening and who will watch this clip on Facebook or YouTube or whatever is this. Speaking from a religious point of view as a pastor, we need to understand that science is not anti-scripture, foremost. And secondly, we need to find a way to disassociate our political inclinations from public health issues, and to follow through science and ask the question. For those who are hesitant, I think that being open to engage in dialogue is a fundamental principle of any faith, to reason, to ask questions, to be able to be educated on facts, not fictions, and on truth, not lies. So I think that the more we can create these awareness, the more we can explain it in languages and concepts that the common person on the street can understand, the more chances we have of combating effectively this virus. If we don't do this comprehensive engagement from every angle that it should take, then the production of the vaccine itself is not going to be a remedy to the continuation of COVID-19's devastating effect upon our people and upon the country. So I hope that we continue to have this conversation, And I hope that those of us who are within the religious institution be open to ask the right question and to be educated on matters that we're not certain about. Thank you.
Yeah, Dr. Ari, now your turn. We know that the technology is good. We know that the vaccine is good, but we have a problem of uptake, and it's behavioral. Basically, I bring my baggage along. I have history to remember. I still remember Tuskegee. I still remember the lead research in Baltimore. I have a lot of things to remember. Tell me why I should trust you.
Doc, forget about all those. Forget about history in this case and follow the science. And in following the science, read the right literature. Don't just watch news. I know most of us sometimes just tune into Fox, and that's where we get our news from, and that cannot take us far. But let's be avid readers. It's important. Let's look at the journals. What is going on? What is the new breakthrough? And I know if we subscribe to some scientific journals, they can also give us just update lines, and those can be very useful, very important. So we are all somewhat educated. It's important we forget getting any direction from the news and try to follow science in terms of scientific journals and see what they are giving us through. And then we can use that information to make decisions. Number two, those of us who have gotten the information, let's find places, channels to disseminate the information. Otherwise, information is not useful if just one person knows it.
Yes.
It is not useful to me to know that the recombinant DNA technology is safe and efficacious, but I cannot share that information with the people I know, starting from my household to my church, and then to the rest of the community. So let's try to be just proactive, step out there, find time, share this information when you're talking to people at home. I know people will be saying, we don't want it, but just let them know that, hey, this thing is safe, it will be helpful. And in as much as I said initially that there is more to be learned, but I can easily say that the recombinant DNA has been tested over time since it started, and it has been shown to be highly a safe technology. So I would plead to everyone, those who have listened to me and those who will be listening to this recording later, please read, get information from the right people, and those who are politicians, even those who are in Kenya, get also to be involved to pass the information to your people if you can't explain it to the people, use the people that have this information, bring them into sessions, and let's talk, let's share the right information, and people will make right decisions. Behavior can always be changed, and behavior is changed with information. But if we don't have the right information, we'll still continue behaving into the wrong direction. So thank you so much for your time, and that's all I could say for now.
Thank you very much. This has been a very educative session. We know that the mortality, the case fatality rate among the black Americans and Africans is higher. We also know that the hesitancy rate is higher, but we want them to know that this is safe. And we want to get this message across, that it is safe and it is for the good of the community and for the society, for us to get the vaccine when it becomes available to us. Thank you very much, gentlemen. We will see you next week when we meet again. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.